Hello, everyone. Welcome to our town hall today. My name is Mike Molesky, and I'm sitting in for Hannah McCarthy, the regular host. Topic of today's discussion will be America Proud. We're very fortunate to live in the greatest country in the history of mankind. And part of what makes it great is we've continually improved our system peacefully since 1776. While it's easy to focus on negative issues facing our country today, it's also important to remember how great the country is to give us hope for the future. We have three guests today. Hannah and Nick McCarthy are committee people from the Borough of Westchester. Many of you will recognize Hannah as our regular host of the Town Hall series. Annette Baker is the Republican nominee for Pennsylvania's 11th State Senate District. And in order for things to run more smoothly today, we're going to ask everyone to keep themselves on mute, and we're going to utilize the chat feature to answer your questions. You can access the chat feature in one of two ways. As you move your mouse, you'll notice a series of icons at the bottom of your screen. If you click on the chat icon, that'll open up a separate window. If you can't find that icon, you can hold down the Alt key and press the letter H, which should bring up the same window. At the conclusion of the program, we'll be answering the questions that have been submitted, and I'll try and group like questions so that we can avoid duplicates and get to as many questions as we possibly can. As I said earlier, in order to minimize noise and distractions, background issues, we ask that you do remain on mute for the duration of the town hall. Now that we've gotten those logistics worked out, I'd like to introduce John. He's our Republican nominee for the Pennsylvania 6th Congressional District, which encompasses all of Chester County and the southern portion of Berks County up to Reading. John is a manufacturing operations executive with experience managing employees around the world in the United States, including also overseas in countries like India and Germany. John has a degree in chemical engineering from SUNY Buffalo. He and his wonderful wife have been married for nearly 40 years now, and they have 3 children and 3 grandchildren. John is running for Congress to improve our healthcare system, to fix our broken immigration system, and to grow the United States economy and create good jobs for folks here in this 6th Congressional District. One of the best things about John is that I think it's very pertinent today is that he is a patriot, not a politician, and he's here to serve our country, and that's why I'm very proud to introduce John and turn the meeting over to him at this time.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome, everyone. Another Saturday morning, another town hall. This one's a little different. As we look back right now and we realize that next Wednesday is the beginning of July. So we look back and we said, oh, half the year is gone now. It's been quite a half a year, one like none of us have ever seen before, but it is what it is. We knew 2020 was going to be unique, and but not quite to this degree. But as we look back, we recognize that half the year is gone, but the best part of that is that July 4th is just around the corner. And I think that's one of my favorite holidays. It's when we get to celebrate our freedom, not only from England and mother country, but more importantly, our freedom as individuals, part of our culture. And that's why I think it's one of all of our favorite holidays. It's also a time to remember, though. We remember when courageous men gathered 244 years ago in a place not too far from here, and they debated and they bickered and they came up with a resolution. And part of that resolution says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That great document, people remember that. They don't quite so often remember what's stated at the end of that document. Remember that they finished that document with a pledge. It was a mutual pledge. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. And because they did that, and because they followed through on that declaration, that's why we're here today. That's why we can celebrate the 4th of July and our independence and all that has come from that. So I want to remember that. So we decided what we would do is take 2 weeks out and move away from issues and spend the next 2 weeks looking at aspects of our country patriotism. As Mike mentioned, we're not hearing much of that these days. In fact, we're hearing just the opposite. These have been very difficult times. We tend to hear things that are very disturbing. We see these images on TV, and they are very disturbing. They clearly are very anti-American. We don't hear enough people standing up for America and pushing back and talking about America, and that's what we want to do. So since the 4th is coming up, that's what we want to do. I wanted to have something positive, something that was uplifting, and I thought that patriotism was just the thing for this time of year. So today we want to do that. We want to talk about American proud. I don't know if I coined that, but I like that term, American proud. And what makes us proud to be Americans? So as Mike says, we have a couple unique guests today. I thought it would be good to get an independent view from folks and to do it from different age groups. So we have 3 different age groups represented. So we'll kick that off right now. We'll start with Hannah and Nick McCarthy, and then we'll have a chance to listen to Annette and then me. So Hannah, let me hand it over to you and let you and Nick share with us why you're proud to be an American.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's a privilege and honor to be here this morning, and I get to talk about America, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. So I wrote a few different things down because I was like, what am I going to say about being a proud American? And it really kind of goes back to my start. So this country and what it stands for has shaped my family, my life, just every choice. I grew up actually in Germany and Greece. My father was in the Air Force, and I had the privilege to experience different cultures at a very young age. So living abroad at the end of the Cold War, really, and experiencing the fall of the Berlin Wall, it was all incredible to see so many break through the chains of communism right then and there. So that was kind of my first impression of the power of different countries coming together. Yet while I did not spend most of my childhood in the US, I did spend a lot of time around Americans on base and visiting family in the States. And looking back, it's crazy to me how much it felt like home every time we would go on base overseas. The flags, the feeling, just being around Americans. And I didn't know it then, but looking back on it now, it's clear to me that Americans make America great. You know when you're around them. So I didn't grow up with much. I remember my mom praying for a way to find new shoes for my sister and I. And to this day, I cannot eat boxed macaroni or anything that resembles noodles in a cup. I just can't. Like, don't even bring it near me. But I had a very hardworking and loving family. It didn't matter what I had material-wise. My parents instilled in me a sense of self-worth and of ethics, of treating people how I wanted to be treated, and seeking solutions rather than soothing my own problems. My dad would tell me that I'm never better than a paycheck, and I had to take pride in everything I do, regardless of how small the job was. I've seen my parents go from poverty to prosperity throughout their lifetime, and it's been incredible to see. I truly believe that being in this country has enabled them to do just that. They live their lives in a land of the home and the brave and work their asses off to get better. I'm sorry, I just said asses, but it's true. America is a very special place. Whenever I travel, I always end up in conversation with locals who have a lot of opinions about the US. They usually tell me about how crazy America is, how they either love the president or hate the president, whatever it might be, that America has an eating problem, a working problem, a television watching problem, the list goes on. And don't get me wrong, I definitely criticize my own country a lot, but I think the heart behind that criticism is a little different. I think that Americans are bent on improving and not just complaining. I think Americans are obsessed with wanting the best for themselves and their families, and they have the freedom to take the steps to get to where they want to go. I've seen that in my life and so many of the people around me. I love Americans because we don't hide the fact that we have shortcomings. That is very clear with everything going on. It's clear throughout our history that we have taken an imperfect system and that we continually seek to make it better, to learn and to grow. I think that's awesome. And I think, once again, you can see this today. We are in the struggle to improve. Yet, even in the midst of these trials, we are not afraid about speaking truth. We have the freedom to speak truth. We share the hard stuff, the good, the bad, the ugly, glorious things about our past and our history. And I don't think that's the intent is to tear down at all. I think because we know we have the ability to maintain the mindset of finding a way to build and to grow forward. So in America, we have that choice, that freedom. And honestly, that's why I'm American proud.
Very good. Thank you. Was Nick going to share today, or is
Yeah, he's on.
Hey, John. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, so as John said, my name's Nick McCarthy, and you know, I'm a millennial and a conservative. I've got, you know, with some libertarian influences. So I think most folks here would agree that the temperature in the country's been a little elevated lately. I think John's wise in this moment to bring a discussion about things we're proud of in the country. And I think the first thing that I'm really proud of is America's nature as a proposition country. The U.S. is not a country built around a tribe like in the old world, whether that be in, you know, continental Europe or Asia, what have you. You can be an American if you love what America is about. And just as John said before, those things are namely life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want to make a note about that last item. The phrase "the pursuit of happiness" is a modification on philosopher John Locke's idea about the pursuit of property, meaning specifically that you have the right to the things that you cultivate in this life. So that's an encouragement to hard work and making your own way. In this country, we believe it's a natural right to own the things that you cultivate in this life. And I think that's critical to our success as a country. You know, this whole idea of a proposition country is big for me because my mom and my paternal grandmother were both immigrants. My mom came from France and has become a U.S. citizen. My grandmother survived the Nazi-occupied Netherlands. She traveled the world and she ended up becoming an American citizen here. And she, you know, she was a great American citizen and a real person about our community. So those are things that I'm proud of. Number two for me is innovation and making your own way. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was a newspaper editor named H.L. Mencken. He used to edit the Baltimore Sun, and he once wrote that the American art is business. So for me, I'm continually wowed by the dynamism, innovation, and creativity and tenacity of many Americans. I'll give one example. His name is Jack Dorsey. He's the founder of Twitter, and he's probably not very popular with this crowd right now. But he also started Square payment systems. And you've probably seen it at small businesses. It's the little white box, or, you know, it's the little box you attach to a phone and you swipe your credit cards. And he started that because he wanted to undercut the big credit card companies and the big merchant processors and get more people than ever access to merchant services on a global scale. Right? So think about that. He wanted to get as many people in business in the world as possible. And so he built the software, he built the system, he did it. Square empowers millions of small business globally, and it made Jack a billionaire. So, you know, I think for all his shortcomings in other areas, I think he has a populist streak in some other ways. And so that's one. Sorry, folks, did you lose me? I just had a call. Okay.
We've got you back now, Nick.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So, anyways, as I was saying, you know, for all the concerns that we have about him at the moment, I think, you know, I think he has a populist streak, and I'm proud of that. And obviously, there's tons of other things. Even just in Chester County, there's tons of it. There's tons of innovation and people making their own way. I think the third thing, you know, obviously this, you know, my pride is really ideas oriented. First Amendment and Second Amendment are really important to me. I would say for the First Amendment, our closest ideological cousin is the United Kingdom or England, and they don't have anywhere near the freedom to speak their mind about things as we do. People over there are getting jailed for saying mean things online. I don't endorse or encourage being a jerk, but at the same time, I don't think police should knock your door down for being one. I think it's really underappreciated. Second Amendment makes me proud too, because you know, we have one tool as people to push back against our government that most other people in the world don't get. I think widespread responsible gun ownership is unique and a boon to our country. And I think it's probably saved us from more things than we know. I'll finish with this. This one's kind of funny, but I love that you get free refills in America. That's, you know, I've traveled around the world, never seen it anywhere else. I don't know why we do it here, but I think it's pretty cool. So those are things that make me proud of where we are.
Great, thank you. Well, let's transition over to Annette. As Mike said, Annette is running for state senate in the 11th district, which is in Berks. So I had the great good fortune of meeting Annette about a year ago, and got to know her quite well. And I'm really pulling for her. I think she is a great candidate. We can't wait to see her in Harrisburg. So Annette, tell us why you're proud to be an American.
Well, thank you so much, John, for your endorsement and your help and encouragement. You know, everyone's already touched on a lot of things already. Both Hannah and Nick brought up some points that I was going to mention, and you did as well. For me, it probably comes down to the three things that I'm using as part of my campaign: faith, family, and freedom. As Nick touched on, because we have the freedoms in this country, and we were founded, particularly in Pennsylvania, having studied a little bit about William Penn and understanding the heritage of Pennsylvania and how we were founded as a free commonwealth to be able to embrace everyone who has a religion or someone that doesn't have any, to be able to have that freedom here in Pennsylvania and in this country is actually a very unique thing, I think, particularly when you look at some of the other nations around the world where you are persecuted for having a particular faith. The idea of family. In my family, I was the first person in my immediate family to graduate from college. So education and the ability to move within our socioeconomic stratus, as Nick touched on, be able to own property, to be able to pursue happiness, however we may define that, is something that is uniquely American, I believe. There's other countries, obviously, that they don't have those kinds of freedoms, and I think that's something that I've appreciated myself. My grandfather was a tenant farmer who moved his family from one farm to another, and my dad was a very poor means when he started out. He was a line cook. He has gone on to build 2 businesses and provided a great life for my mother. My mother worked at times 2 jobs, as did my father, to put my sister and I through school. My sister's now a physician's assistant. And that's part of the wonderful part of our country. If you have an interest in something, you can pursue that. You can begin to explore what you want to do for a career, and you have the ability to change. In some countries, you know, your life path is set when you're a child, and it's very hard to break out of that. So that's one of the things that I love about how we can move and change and within the structure of this country. And in family, we also see, John, as you mentioned, the tapestry, the blending of cultures in our uniquely American culture. That is not particularly one culture. It actually envelops and embraces all kinds of ethnicities. And I think that's the beauty of this country, that we are a melting pot. In this country, we have 110 different languages that are spoken. Obviously, English is our common language, but there are other languages that are spoken, and that is the beauty of this country. We can learn and grow and embrace other cultures and encourage people to do that while acknowledging our unique American culture. As Hannah pointed out, there is a commonality, there's a unity amongst all of us because we are proud of our nation. We do have areas that we acknowledge that we have fallen short as a nation, but that, as Hannah mentioned, that is something that we readily at this point are saying, you know what, we understand things have not necessarily gone the way they should in the past, but we are trying, we're striving to do better. We just have to look at science and healthcare and all the different areas that we are continually inventing. And that's one of the things that excited me when I was younger as a science major in college. I love the idea of questioning and searching the unknown. And I guess it all kind of comes back to the idea of freedoms. Freedoms are what we enjoy. And as Nick mentioned, you know, our Bill of Rights is unique. There's no other country on the face of the earth that is exactly like America. And I think because we do have our freedoms, and we see now with what's going on, as Nick mentioned, the freedom of speech is definitely under attack right now. And that's something that I think we need to really recognize and be willing to stand up and say, you know what, the beauty of the freedom of speech is not that we can limit it, but that we encourage people to express their ideas. And the way to combat speech that we don't necessarily agree with is the idea of having more speech and more dialogue. And I think we're starting to see that happening now, which is really exciting from my perspective, to begin to open up conversations with people that have differing viewpoints and are coming from different perspectives, and that we can civilly sit down, talk about these things, and then move forward to finding common ground and creating, as I hope to do in Harrisburg, creating legislation that helps everyone and encourages and improves our American system. I mean, we have seen in a couple hundred years plus just an amazing governmental system develop and worldwide economic powerhouse that is, when we were booming a few months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, it was unbelievable to see the economic boon that had started, and I believe we're going to get back to that. I really do, providing we have the right leadership. So, it makes me proud. And at the beginning of this town hall, with oh my gosh, I can't think of his name. Proud to be an American. Yes, Green. Can't think of his name right now, but that song always.
Lee Greenwood.
Yeah, Lee Greenwood. Thank you. I knew there was green in there somewhere. Thanks, John. that song always brings tears to my eyes. Not so much because I think America is perfect, but because I believe America has hope, and America is hopeful. We always look toward the future with hope because we want to see things improve. And that's why I love this country, and I'm so passionate about making sure that we abide by our constitutions, that we protect our constitutional rights, and that we are making sure that we pass that on to the next generation. That's why I'm in this fight, is not for me, because I'm heading toward my retirement years at some point, hopefully, but because I want to be able to pass on a nation that has the ability for my kids and my grandkids to enjoy the freedoms that I've enjoyed growing up, the ability to make the choices I've made, and to be able to move forward in life and do the things that I'd like to do as a free person. And that's what I believe is at stake in this election and moving forward. But when July 4th comes, I'll be celebrating all the positive things that America has done in this world, the number of technological advancements that we've helped usher in, the space program, just all the different things that we've done as a nation that have improved our world, not the bad things. It's time to celebrate things that make America great. Thank you so much, John.
Very good. Thank you, Annette. That's wonderful. One thing that I want to make sure everyone understands is when the three of us, the groups, started this, we have not talked about what we were going to say. We just said the topic is going to be American Proud and what that means to you. So it's fun to see the overlap, but also the differences that people have. So with my piece, you'll see a little bit more of the same. I developed the old Johnny Carson top 10 list. I sat down one night and put down 10 items and then forced rank them. Now I won't go through all 10 because there is some overlap, but I think this provides just one more viewpoint, but then also a window on me and what's important to me, and especially about my love for this country, which really is at the core of why I'm running. So the first one I'll mention is what everyone has mentioned so far. America is the great melting pot. It wasn't always straightforward. It wasn't always pretty, but we are the great melting pot where people have come together, and the fabric that has created, as Annette mentioned, when you take those different cultures, I like to refer to it as a celebration of cultures, because when you take those different strands that were represented by those cultures and you put them together, it has created a stronger fabric than anyone else. And I think that's why, because we have those different strands that come together, and we take the best of different cultures, not even intentionally, it just happens naturally. So the great melding pot in my mind is one. Second one is what I call the 5,000 year leap. If you've never read that book, you really need to get it and read it, because it's about innovation and advancement. And in a nutshell, what it's about is over the last 5,000 years, up until about the time of the War for Independence, many things had not changed that much in the world. Agriculture was still done pretty much the same way. Yeah, there were some advancements in warfare, but by and large, we were still living much the same way in the mid 1700s as we were at 4000 BC. So what the thesis of the book is that by our experiment here, by us gaining our freedom and unleashing the human spirit and the entrepreneurship that we've heard about, then that has created this huge engine of innovation and growth. And when you look at how quickly that's happened and what it's done for mankind, it is remarkable. And it started here based on the tenets. And Nick mentioned it, and Annette mentioned it. So again, advertisement for the 5,000 year leap. If you haven't read it, do so. I'll jump down now to another one. I think what I'm proud of is that America is the most giving nation in history and on the face of the earth. We give as from a governmental standpoint, all the aid that we give out is one thing, but even more impressive is how much money gets sent around the world on behalf of us as individuals or through churches or other types of nonprofits. It's amazing how much of our treasure goes out to support other people around the world. And we can't lose sight of that. Our generosity is very strong and will continue to be strong because that's who we are as people. I'll also mention the Constitution and the First Amendment. There are a couple thoughts there. First, just the Constitution alone. People don't realize how rare our Constitution is. One, just to have a Constitution, but then to have that Constitution hold up for 240 years. That is unheard of in this world, and it's still going strong. One of the reasons is because our framers made it adaptable. So just our Constitution alone, we should be very proud of it and defend it all the time. And then the First Amendment, what's been mentioned here today. I mean, the fact that we don't agree, many of us, we all have our own opinion, but the fact that we can have the right to speak, the right freedom of press, even though it might drive us crazy some days, the freedom of the press is still something we should hold dear. The right to assemble. Many places around this earth, you are not allowed to assemble or petition. So the First Amendment, along with all the others, but the first is critical. So I highlight that today. Another one is the fact that we are the land of opportunity. It kind of goes without saying, but opportunity is king. We are the land of opportunity. Millions upon millions of people have come here over the last 300 years. And what's even more impressive is many, many millions, if not billions of people around the world would love to come here. We are the land of opportunity. And that's something that we can't lose sight of when all the negativity that we see today. We are the land of opportunity, have been, will be, and that is something that we cannot lose sight of. Three more things. This is a little bit more finite now, but one was defeating the imperialistic Japanese in World War II. A lot of people don't realize at that time, Japan was working very hard to expand their territory. They were in China. They were basically enslaving the Chinese people. They were in Korea. They were in Southeast Asia, and they were looking to grow and dominate. And obviously, Pearl Harbor happened along with a number of other things, but we fought hard, and we were actually fighting two separate wars, but we prevailed. So to me, I'm very proud of the stances that we took with regard to that. Very much related, my next one is helping to defeat the Nazis and the fascists in World War II in Europe. In a similar way, what we saw Hitler doing was he wanted world domination, and he would stop at nothing to get that. When you think of all the things that he did, all the brutality, all the cruelty, and then the role that we played, both early on supplying Britain to try to keep them viable, and then the invasions and all the other things, the rebuilding of Europe, the Marshall Plan, all those things were, to me, speak about who we are as a people and as a country, and the fact that we would give so much to help defend other people, I think is remarkable. And then lastly, the last one is a little obscure, and most people don't think about this, but I think it's worthy of mentioning. Possessing a weapon that no one else could defend against. We had a weapon that no one else could defend against. It was the atomic bomb. And if you think back to that time frame, no one else had one. We did. But the fact that we did not use it to gain power and territory. That's the first time in human history that someone had a military advantage and did not use that to expand their power and their territory. So it's a point that most people never even think about. But what could we have done? We did the right thing. We fought on two fronts. We used that weapon to conclude one of those wars, but then we stopped, and we did not use that military superiority to continue to take over other parts of the world. So that's all part of our being, and I think that we never want to lose sight of that either. So when you wrap all those things together, that's why I'm running. That's why I'm standing up for the promise of America, because I truly believe we are the light to the rest of the world. And if not for us, who would do it? No one. It's up to us to do it. We have done it. We continue to do it. We'll do it in the future, assuming we make the right decisions coming up in November. So with that, I will pause, and I will turn it back over to Mike to see what questions may have come in for all of us here on the panel.
Well, thank you, John. I think everyone's actually been intrigued and listening to what each of you has to say. So that we haven't had a lot coming in on the chat. I'd encourage anyone who does have a question at this time to go ahead and type it in. I'd be happy to add it to the list. I guess the first question that I would have for you is, of all the amendments to the Constitution, you could argue that only 2 of them expanded the powers of the federal government, and one of them was repealed. Is there, of those amendments, is that, I guess, should that be a lesson to us in today's society in terms of how we think about how the government can solve our problems versus what we need to take individual responsibility for?
Well, I think that's one of the unique features of the Constitution, that the framers did provide the provision, and not just one provision, the provision to change or amend the Constitution. They actually can be done several different ways. And I think one that you were referring to was prohibition. We actually, we went to prohibition, and then we went away from it because that's what the country ultimately decided they wanted to do. So I think that speaks to the power of the Constitution and the fact that it can be amended. But honestly, the one that I really like is the potential Article 5, the Convention of States, because when you stop and you think about it, as the federal government gets bigger and bigger and more intrusive and overreaching, what do we have as states? Remember, we are the United States of America, and that's typically what the tension is in the country. What's the federal power versus state power? But I think it's utterly fantastic that the states have the ability, if compelled to actually call for a convention of states and then to amend the Constitution. You won't find that anywhere else. You'll find that here.
Well, thank you, John. I guess a question just came in that I think is sort of a follow-up to that question in a certain way. In light of the history of our country, I would say it's often been described as the philosophy of the country was rugged individualism. And it changed during the Great Depression. We had obviously the New Deal, and then that gave way to the Great Society programs in the 1960s. Do you, I guess this question was for all 4 of you. What do you guys have a perspective on how that may have impacted our country in terms of people's sense of entitlement and what they expect from their government? And is there anything, well, I'll stop there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll invite the guests to take a crack at that first. I don't want to dominate the Q&A. So Annette or Nick or Hannah, do you want to offer an opinion on that?
Sure, I'll jump in too on that one. Absolutely, the programs that you're talking about, the way I have always approached it has been more of a safety net idea as opposed to the stretcher. The programs are meant to help people that are in need. And I think that's where you mentioned it, Mike, when you were talking about the idea of rugged individualism. That is one of the great things about our nation, and the ability for people to be self-sufficient. And I think that's what the framers had in mind, at least from my readings and from my interpretation. My understanding is that they wanted each of us to be free, to be able to make those decisions, but as a collective, as a commonwealth, particularly here in Pennsylvania. It's interesting, being a commonwealth versus a state, the power rests in the people. And that's what I think we've kind of gotten away from, is understanding that the rights and privileges are given to the government by the consent of the people. And I think we're seeing that tension, as John mentioned, that tension is becoming more prevalent now, with the idea of the people saying, wait a minute, there are certain things we're just not okay with. Maybe we need to take back some of those powers. And I think that's something that people are becoming a little bit more aware of. And that's a good thing, to be able to reevaluate, to kind of re-educate people on how the Commonwealth and the nation were founded.
I think, if I could jump in here, and that I think, one of the issues with the FDR programs is that it ends up representing a sort of a sea change in America's relationship with its government. So it's one of the moments in time where the federal government really gets a lot bigger, and was a starting point for a lot of the things we see today, where government is trying to reach in and manage a lot more aspects of our lives day to day. So I think that's one impact from there. And I think, it started there, and we might have to peel some of that back if we want to get spending under control and whatnot.
Okay. I think, Mike, from my perspective, a couple thoughts. I agree very strongly with Annette that, to me, something that was intended to be a safety net has grown over time, mainly because I think of the politicization of it. People have used those as weapons to pit one group against another. And I think that's a sad thing. It's a reality. I understand it, but it's unfortunate that that's what's done. That's why I think this next election is so critical, because we're so close to the tipping point that, I think we all know that, only roughly half of the population is paying taxes. That's a dangerous place when literally half of your population, for whatever reason, is not contributing. And we've all heard the saying, you can rob Peter to pay Paul, and we see that all the time in American politics today. So I think that's one of the challenges that we have, is how to overcome that. And that's why one of my strongest things is I want to grow good jobs in the economy, because to me, that's the basis for a stronger country. If you have 3.5% or 3% unemployment, then you're in a much better position to where people are providing for themselves and their families, not looking to the government for help. One of the other things I'll mention is I don't always agree with all of the amendments of the Constitution. The one I dislike the most is the 16th, where we created the income tax, the IRS, or the income tax system. And why do I say that? Well, when you think about what the government did at that point, they created a mechanism by which they could reach literally into your pockets within the state. They could extract money, and then, in essence, make you beg for it to get it back. Today they talk about the government's money. It's not the government's money, it's our money, and we pay taxes. you would think it's their money. No, it's not. But because they do that, now what have they done with that? That's not inherently bad, but now they've weaponized it. They've weaponized at times the IRS and just the way that they extract money, and then they put strings to it to get it back so you can use it for the good of your state or your county, what have you. I think hopefully sometime in the future there are various tax reforms that do something about that. And I could probably do a whole town hall on that, and I just might come August. But that, to me, that just empowers the federal government to be that much more intrusive and invasive when they can literally reach into the states, extract money, and then make the states beg to get it back with strings attached.
Well, thank you, John. And I think we may have time for one or two more questions. So the one I'll go to next is how, obviously there's a narrative right now that we're hearing on colleges and universities, also in part, pieces of the media, we're saying we need to fundamentally transform America. I guess I'd like to offer each of our guests the opportunity to respond to that. Do you believe that that this is a country that needs to fundamentally change, or what would your response to that be if someone told you that?
Want to go in the same order?
Sure, that sounds great.
Annette, are you ready, or?
I'm ready.
Okay, have at it.
Nick is trying to wrestle some Chorkies at the moment. Our small dogs went crazy. So I actually graduated from Darden, University of Virginia Business School last year. So it's kind of fresh in my mind about university life. And I'm 33, even though my cheeks say otherwise, my mother's facial structure. But it was interesting going from undergrad back when I was 20 into experiencing school 10, 11 years later, and seeing just kind of how the shift has gone from what are you learning professionally to how can you change your mindset about how you think about people. And I think when the focus is not teaching people skills and instead trying to teach them how to engage in a totally different worldview, I think there's a danger there, because then you end up coming out of these universities with not much use, not much skill, and I see that a lot. For my experience, I love Darden. I think it's an amazing school, but whenever I or a few students had a different opinion, we got a very low grade, and it was very apparent, very frustrating, and I don't think they encourage free thought and choices. I think they encourage you have to have the same in order to move forward. And I think transformation is great, but you can't look at a problem and just say, let's just create something new and avoid the problem. It's kind of like slapping a new technology on something and hoping that it gets better. It's like, well, fix the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is very different from just transforming into something else. I think when you decide to soothe things rather than solve things, you create so much more problems down the road. And I think we're going to see that probably in the next couple of years of what comes out of the education system, and especially universities. I think that they are a grounds of trying to gear people to think one way, as opposed to encouraging people to have their own opinions. And so that's kind of not downing universities too much, but I think that was pretty apparent in my my recent experience.
Annette?
Hey, well, yeah, it's interesting with Hannah's perspective, because I've heard that from other young people that I've talked to. The idea of not encouraging free thought. We've met, people have heard of the free speech zones now that are on university campuses and colleges around the country that people are too, it's too damaging to be exposed to things that do not conform to what you already believe. To be challenged can be harmful or hurtful. That was something that for me took a while to understand, because when I was in college, I appreciated the professors that actually would present multiple ideas and say, okay, here's the information, you choose which one you want to believe in, and I think that's unique, to a unique perspective that doesn't happen as often anymore. In fact, that's something that as a homeschool mom, I've encouraged my kids to really delve into critical thinking and delve into different perspectives and not be afraid of that. The idea of transforming our society, we always have to step back and say, okay, transforming it into what? And I think Hannah was alluding to that. What exactly are we transforming it into? And since we're talking books today, I'm a huge book person. My house is full of bookcases. I'm not saying I've read every single one. I have a whole stack to read now. But one of the books that was very enlightening to me was Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. If you have never read that book, I would highly recommend it. It will give you a very good understanding of what's happened in our society over the last 40 or 50 years, and the long game that those that want to ultimately transform our society, what their plans are. Because as you read through his points, you'll begin to recognize that they are actually being implemented in almost every facet of our society right now. And that's something that, is concerning to me. I personally believe that there should be no free speech zones on college campuses. Students should not be penalized if they don't hold the quote unquote common viewpoint. We should have multiple viewpoints. That's the beauty of our nation, as I mentioned before, and as Nick mentioned, the idea of freedom of thought. That's how our country was actually formed. There was lots of different thought about how to govern a nation, and the founding fathers took all of that together, synthesized it down, I believe, under divine inspiration. It was all put together and created such a unique underpinning to what became this nation. And those are the kinds of things I'm afraid that we're missing out on. We're missing out on innovative breakthroughs, ways to approach different problems that we have right now. And I believe John's right. We're at a tipping point in our nation. And I had a discussion with a young African-American young man who's a good friend of mine. I've known him for years. And he and I had a very long heart-to-heart about all of the things that we're seeing that's happening right now. And he said, it's great that people are talking about making change. The question is are we actually going to make the change? Are there things that are going to happen, or are we just going to continue talking? Because he said, we've been talking about the same issues for decades, and we really don't ever move forward. So I think we're at that critical tipping point that we have to make some changes, but we also have to make sure that the changes that we implement are changes that are going to move our society forward, and stopping speech. The things that are going on right now with censoring and those kinds of things, I think are actually hurting us in that desire to move forward. Transformation may not necessarily be a bad thing, but it like I said, it comes back to what exactly are we transforming into? If we are transforming from a representative republic, constitutional republic, into a Marxist or a socialist governed system, a lot of people in this country are not going to be very happy about that. And I would definitely put myself in there as one of those that would not want to make that kind of transformational change in this country. And that's something that I think, we have to have that discussion as well as, what are the goals? What are the plans? Where are we moving toward?
Thanks, Annette. I'll echo a few of those comments. I think, to me, there's a difference between fundamental transformation. versus improvement. To me, we've always been about improvement, where we take it a step at a time and we just continually improve. That's what we want to do. That's incremental. That's very healthy. But the type of fundamental changes that they're talking about are step function changes, big jumps at one time. And I think that is very dangerous, because to Annette's point, to what? They haven't been able to articulate what it is. And the fact that we are the greatest nation, have been the greatest nation on the face of the earth, what's this giant transformation going to lead to? To me, it makes a lot more sense to have the dialogue, to have the arguments, and to continually improve as we have been. So I don't think anyone would argue that. You know, we're not perfect. We never have been, but we, in general, have always moved in the right direction, getting better and better every decade, and we've seen that within our own lives. The other thing that I would offer in regard to this is just a very basic concept. One of Ronald Reagan's most famous quotes was, "There is no left, there is no right. It's either up or down." I'm not sure he would have the same opinion today if he could be standing here today and see how polarized we've become. He may change that opinion, but I think the basic premise of his argument remains. It's not about Republican, Democrat, left or right. Are we going up? Are we improving? Are we making life better? Or are we going the other way? So just in keeping with that, when you stop and you look around you and you see what different groups are saying, are they talking about building people up, or are they talking about dividing people? Are they talking about building up or tearing down? Are they talking about bringing people together or dividing them? And I think that's what the most basic thing is that we are looking at as a society. We have a group that wants to literally pit one person against another and then create chaos and anarchy. Whereas most of the rest of the group, although you'd never know it watching our media and what have you, most of the rest of us want to build up. We want to grow. We want to improve. So I think that when it comes down to this election, we need to step back and ask ourselves that question. Are we really trying to grow, raise up, bring people together, or are we just totally, who is just the proponents of division and pitting one person against another? Because that is just going to continue if we go down that path. And it's not about improving the lot of people, it's about grabbing power. And people should be able to see that. So I think that's a very fundamental point. Are we growing? Are we bringing people together, or are we dividing people more for power than anything? And that should help people make the right choice when they get to November.
Well, thank you to everyone for your answers to that question. I'm looking at the clock, and we've run over our allotted time. I think it was a great discussion, though, and so I guess, John, I'd just like to turn it back over to you for some final thoughts.
Okay. Again, folks, thanks for tuning in, and also remember, if you can't get on a Saturday morning, we are putting these up. We do record these. We take out the edits from the beginning and the end, so we have just the core matter, but we are putting these up on our YouTube channel. Sometimes it takes a few days to get all that done, but sometime in the course of the next few days, this will be up. So I think that's key. Next week, I look forward to having the next town hall. And it's also going to be about American Proud. And what we're going to feature next week are some veterans to get their perspective on what it means to be a proud American. So I really look forward to that. It's a fantastic group. We wouldn't be here without them. And I look for every opportunity to highlight them, praise them, recognize them, and really look forward to next week.
Well, thank you, John, and I'd like to thank Annette, Hannah, and Nick for giving their time and perspective to today's meeting. We look forward to celebrating our country's birthday next Saturday, and hope to be able to join all of you then. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your questions, and God bless America.
Thank you, Mike.
Can I say anything or not? Is it too late?
Sure. Can we get
Yeah, Irv Zeller, actually. And I've been listening, the last several weeks and so forth. And I think all the comments are all very healthy and very good. And my problem is, how do we get John Emmons elected? And now we talk about concepts and goals and all that. But, I actually get emails from the opponent, the one that's the other candidate here, with regards to those town halls, the virtual town halls, the telephone town halls. And it seems like there's tremendous momentum on the other side. And I realize there's a lot of funding on the other side. In fact, case in point, just during this past week, I saw a television on Fox, and it was for Chrissy Houlihan. I got actually an ad for her. And I just wonder, how are we going to get John Emmons? I think he's a very good citizen. I think he's a great candidate. I'm 100%, 110% behind him. But how can we get him out there with his name, the recognition? And I understand also it takes a lot of money. On the other side, they have people like George Soros, who I think has played a role in Philadelphia, Delaware County, and so forth with the elections. And that money goes around, and a lot of it is sort of under the table. One doesn't really know who's supporting what there, but I know there's a lot of money going in to support these other candidates. And the basic thing, it gets down to one thing here: elections have consequences. And if we don't get the right people in here, it's going to go the wrong way. And I think Annette Baker said something very well with regards to Saul Alinsky and Rules for Radicals, because I did read that. And unfortunately, it's very, very problematic right now, because a lot what has been said is really coming sort of to fruition. And it's going to go more and more, I think, depending on what happens in November. And when you talk about the Constitution, the greatest thing written, the Bill of Rights, these things can all be changed dramatically. And I think the other side is really in position to do that. So if you're a proud American like I am, and actually I'm at the other age of the spectrum of Nick and Hannah. I just hit 9-0 here recently, and so I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of America. I hate to see it going the way it's going right now. And the last thing I'll say is with regards to all the destruction that's going on. You don't see the other side coming out and complaining about it. Nothing. They're quiet, and that's really disturbing too. In fact, I think in many cases they're enabling it. And so these things are very bad for now, is bad for the future. You look at all these little pieces put together, the pattern's not very good right now, but we've got to get people like John Emmons and other people like that elected so we can sort of put a stop to some of this and get something back to so-called law and order and the right perspectives and healthy perspectives. And again, diversity, diversity we have with regards to culture, race, and so forth. But on the college campuses, there's no diversity of opinion. What about that word diversity? They use it when they want to use it, and they ignore it when they don't want to use it. So, I don't do chat and I don't do text and all that. That's why sort of I'm interjecting myself right now, and I hope I'm not being presumptuous and over the top here. But that's one way I want to get my thoughts to you and to the rest of the people. And I look at the number of participants here, and I think there's something like relatively few, like 10 to 14 today. And you look at the other side, they have a lot of people, but they have that momentum. And unfortunately, it doesn't mean they have a better candidate. It's just they have a better somehow strategy there, and teams are working together. And another thing on my mind is that with regards to community organizers, I think a lot of times these are community organizers. They get together with other people and chats, and then that they develop their own little support groups there, and that sort of grows. Now, community organizers are great in organizing, but they're not very good at governing, and I think that's a problem. But you get people in, and they are voted in, and they have a lot of support, and the people are really supporting not so much that they're keen about the candidate, but they all are together in that group. It's like a herd mentality. And so I guess basically I like to see John Emmons elected, and I realize it takes a lot of money. If we had Santa Claus out there and had a bag full of, it would be really good. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. So I just wanted to know, maybe in the future, you can dwell on some of your suggestions on how we can be much more effective in electing good candidates like yourself. So with that, I'll end, but thank you very much. I appreciate sitting in on these conversations. I think it's all very good, very healthy concepts. The goals are good, and how do we meet those goals? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think that first off, we've actually had a lot of people drop off the meeting at this point since we've run over. But I think an important thing to remember is that this is a government, by the people and of the people, and it should be for the people. And one thing we can all do is, if we have the means to contribute to a campaign, that's obviously something. But talking to friends and neighbors, organizing meet and greets. John's willing to go out in the district wherever people are interested in hearing from him. So I think that's one thing we can certainly do as a group. And I think that the more we reach out to people and converse with them and exchange dialogue, the more momentum that we will build. And that's ultimately what's going to win this election. So I know that's a very simplified answer to a complex question, but I think that's, at the end of the day, basically everything starts with friends talking to friends and neighbors talking to neighbors, as John quite often says.
Yeah, I think we probably ought to leave it at that for now, because I think that question probably could command a 20-minute response. But don't be fooled by the spending and the what looks like momentum on their side. We know differently based on work we've done. Yeah, there will be money thrown at this, but it's a much different situation today than it was 2 years ago. My opponent has a record. Now she's going to attempt to run away from that record, but she cannot run away from the fact that she has voted with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time. She ran as a moderate. There are many, many, many people that we interact with that are incensed that she called herself a moderate and that she's anything but. So there's what you're experiencing right now, I believe, is that there's a silent majority, as there always is, but it's more silent and more of a majority than ever. And we will never get the right answer until November 3rd or whenever they're done counting the mail-in ballots. People just are very guarded right now. People are very concerned about just their own security, the privacy, etc. So when you put that all together, I think actually the momentum is on our side, although because of everything that you see in the media and you hear and what the newspapers are doing, who they cover, who they don't cover, it may look like the momentum is on the other side. I can absolutely guarantee you, though, that's not the case. There's actually a negative momentum on, especially with her campaign. And it's not visible quite yet. I'm not sure it will be until after November 3rd. But what we're seeing and hearing and getting data on clearly points to that. But you're right, we have a lot of work to do to continue to get my name out and many people around the country like me. And we will continue to do that every day between now and November 3rd. And God willing, we will prevail.
Thank you, everyone, for your time, and have a wonderful Saturday.
Very good. Thank you all.